Hi, my name is Chris Andrews, Group Product Manager for the Geo-Enabled Systems team here at Esri, and with me is Anthony Renteria, Product Manager for ArcGIS Geobim and AEC Workflows, and we're very happy to be presenting our roadmap for BIM and GIS interoperability to you here at the 2021 Esri Virtual Developer Summit. Before we dive too far into the presentation, I'd like to just remind everyone to be careful about making purchasing and business decisions based upon forward-looking statements. We are happy to share with you, and we just want you to be careful and understand that plans can change. So why are we here talking about BIM and GIS? Imagine that you manage an asset in a complex natural and urban environment. And now imagine needing to implement change in that environment. As you can see, the coordination that it took to gut and begin the renovation of this building in downtown San Diego required more than just information about the building itself. It also required information about local ordinances and regulations for dust and noise, the ability to understand when traffic would be at peak time so that construction equipment could come in and out, and many more aspects that go well beyond the building's exterior. We are seeing the opportunity to help implement and influence change globally around everything from long overdue infrastructure change to new changes that have been triggered by the pandemic and the change in lifestyle that COVID has brought to everyone around the world. The same questions that can be asked about a building that's being transformed in the middle of San Diego can be asked about any of these projects and problems around the world. What we see is that BIM, which is a process for optimizing cost and time during the construction process, supplies detailed information about assets, and GIS typically provides information about assets in the context of the built and natural environment around them. Every question that we find that is about change in the world around us really boils down to four basic primary key elements that I talk about that can be used to tie together BIM and GIS. Where is the problem or asset change being implemented? Who is involved? What assets or features are changing? And at what time scale or at what time increment is the change required? There are a variety of common business drivers for BIM and GIS integration that we see, and many of these involve customization or extension of existing BIM and GIS capability through development and integration. Our partners and customers are asking us to help increase project efficiency by the better application of GIS in the construction process itself, to help decrease risk by making it possible to more readily see regulations and issues, compliance issues about projects. They're asking to help increase competitiveness through portfolio sales and through new capabilities and all kinds of other aspects of bringing together GIS and BIM. Some of our customers are moving to new models. Many of those models include building out new services on top of GIS and BIM brought together. Our customers and partners are often asking us to help them extend their capabilities, such as through managed services. And then we have customer demand. Customers want better access to information coming from both of those domains at their fingertips. The BIM-focused AEC market is really filled with geospatial opportunity. There are unmet needs in planning, design, construction, program management, maintenance, and operations. And we see the integration and customization of experiences around GIS and BIM to be possible and actually have fruitful opportunities throughout. Our world is transforming. We have a tremendously advanced capability to abstract and model real-world assets and systems as digital models, and we can do this now for natural systems, facilities and structures, networks, and entire cities and urban areas. These abstractions are increasingly being referred to as digital twins, And GIS provides a framework for creating and integrating a variety of digital representations or digital twins of assets. And GIS itself has been being used to create digital twins for decades. And now we're seeing the application of GIS into whole new ways of visualizing, analyzing, and observing the built and natural environment through these digital representations. Through location, we have the ability to pull together many different digital representations of real-world assets and natural systems. We can pull together information from design and engineering, infrastructure, asset management, construction, and many other areas, combine them into systems and workflows and data models upon which you can operate to help achieve higher confidence in decision making, better process optimization, better risk management, and to target goals such as increased transparency, higher efficiency, and even sustainability. GIS enables dynamic outcomes and analysis of digital twins for any type of system. So what integrations are we actually taking a look at today? Well, one of the things that has been out there for the longest time period now is ArcGIS for AutoCAD, which brings the ability to actually work with dynamic GIS information right into the AutoCAD environment. So ArcGIS for AutoCAD works with basic AutoCAD, and it allows you to do things such as sign into ArcGIS Online or Enterprise, view feature services, view base maps, and then to actually help you organize the CAD data such that it can be treated as features over in GIS. Esri has worked with a variety of partners, including Nemetschek, Graebert, and Autodesk, to help integrate directly access to Esri ArcGIS feature services right into design packages such as InfraWorks, Civil 3D, Vectorworks, and AriesMap. And this allows us to help put the access to geospatial information right in the hands of the designer or engineer in their native environment. As you all know, I hope, Autodesk became an alliance partner a couple of years ago, and we've been working hard on a variety of integration connections with them. Right now, you can connect Autodesk Civil 3D directly to ArcGIS Online and Enterprise, and using the same type of connector, you can also connect InfraWorks. ArcGIS has added the ability to read Autodesk Revit information and Autodesk Civil 3D information, and then we even added the capability to connect to BIM 360 and download and access files directly from ArcGIS Pro in the catalog interface. Now I'm going to turn it over to Anthony.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Renteria, and I'm the product manager for Arcgis Geobim and also focusing on the AEC industry. So what I have for you today is to go through how we've been evolving these capabilities within ArcGIS Pro to read BIM and CAD formats, but then also evolve that journey to also take this into WebGIS, and then also go over some of the new things that we have coming down the roadmap that I think a lot of you will be interested in. So let's start moving forward and begin with this first topic of how we are first directly reading CAD and BIM files directly into ArcGIS Pro. So when we first begin this journey, the first step a lot of times is where is BIM content being stored? And in the last year, we actually focused on this new development project that was focusing on really connecting GIS users to where BIM content may be stored, and in this case, Autodesk BIM 360. So now users have this experience directly within ArcGIS Pro to be able to access their content or content that's been shared with them with project teams that may be DWG files or Revit files, but directly within their own ArcGIS catalog view. And so that way they can bring this data directly into Pro and start beginning to use it within their own GIS workflows. And while that's been helpful, we've also been supporting other format types that they can bring in through that same experience, which is also enabling users to bring in Civil 3D DWG data sets. And then that way, as you're seeing, you can be bringing this in as pipe networks being brought into the utility network model, or maybe it's just creating 3D symbology of the different assets and features within a scene, but then combining this information with buildings and other geometries to help really set this rich geospatial contextual view that you can then share out with teams. Like we see this idea of enabling the user to bring various forms of data sets that they're interested in using all within the ArcGIS Pro interface. Now, in addition to just bringing in Civil 3D data sets, we've also had Revit support for quite a while now. And that first version of Revit support within Pro actually consisted of this workflow we're demonstrating right here. And that's if, even to this day, if you drag and drop a Revit file into Pro, this is the process it will follow. It's going to automatically create a building layer from that information. And then from there, you can create a building scene layer package that can be shared back into Pro or into online and enterprise services. But then we also need to provide additional enhancements that we know users would want. Like if you wanted to combine multiple Revit files or add additional sources, or maybe it's just have editing capabilities. We didn't really have that in this specific workflow case. And so what we implemented last year was this ability to create multiple files or multiple Revit models into a single feature data set within a geodatabase by using this BIM file to geodatabase tool. So now users have more flexibility in the quantity of data they want to bring in. And so once you have that, you do have this ability to create building layers that are taken from multiple sources. Or maybe it's a skyscraper that has been broken down into multiple different files, and now you have the ability to combine it into a single building layer source. Or it might be you have multiple buildings across a campus. You have that flexibility. And then be able to also simplify your data or maybe enhance it with other sources, and then bring in additional building file types as well. And then in addition to that, we've also implemented a few other enhancements over the last releases where you can extract 2.5D objects for specific assets or features from that Revit file that may be very useful to feeding it directly into your indoor data model, or could be used in ArcGIS indoors or another IPS. But being able to extract floor plans, other footprints like the overall shape of the building, and then even asset mapping with points of interest. You have this ability to use that information in your maps and scenes. And then also incorporate the colors and textures that came from that original Revit model too. And then in this most recent release, we have added additional support for Revit version 2021 files, and then have really worked on enhancing some of the performance of how these processes work and how quickly you can bring in this Revit content. Now, once you have your data set, you can then add in others. So right now, currently, you can bring IFC through Workbench and add into your feature data set. Or you can add in another geodatabase set of information and combine that in with your building feature data set. Or maybe is running a GP tool to help clean or filter out that feature data set. You have these options now that you have a geodatabase. And so once you actually have reviewed it, you've cleaned it up, you scrubbed it with to the degree that you need it to, now you can create that building layer that organizes it by the different sub-layers or systems, and then be able to create a scene layer package from it that can, again, be shared back into Pro for other workflow needs, or take it to web services. And then while that's been a helpful workflow, instead of just having a manual process of creating a scene layer package file that can be uploaded into web services, we wanted to be able to share this directly through the web scene capabilities. So that way, in this workflow that I'm demonstrating right here on this slide, you have this ability to take that feature data set, create your building layer again, but you can actually use the web scene option, which will open up the Share as Web layer dialog. And then in that dialog, you can select whether you want to cache it with various options, and then publish this to online or enterprise. Now, what we're showing is this option of caching it locally or caching it online. Now, the key difference there is when you're caching it locally, it is just creating that scene layer package that's going to be consumed within web services. But if you decide to cache it within online and specifically select some caching options with it, you will enable this ability for editing. And so let's take a look at what that is like. So now with this building scene layer creation, editing, and data management option, you have this ability to start maintaining that scene layer with this associated feature layer. So when we talked about that caching option on the last slide, it's actually creating this second associated feature layer that will work in conjunction with your actual I3S scene layer of the building systems. And so what happens is, as you're posting it to online services, you can, yes, use that information within a scene viewer, or you, depending on what settings you've selected within the caching options. Is it a partial cache? Is it a specific type that allows it by only attributes? Is it geometries? Is it partial geometries? But you have this flexibility to decide what kind of information do you want to edit. So that way, if you bring that layer back down into your Pro interface, you can make edits, then push those edits back up to your online services, and then have it hosted within this associated feature layer that helps rebuild the original scene layer service that would be consumed in other applications. So really important here to also take into account with this new capability that was just released within web services is the idea that, yes, you can rebuild, you can make edits, and you can push edits, but it also allows you to do more with your information and search against it. One specific focus in this that we're showing in the video is you can then create a query or search against the building scene layer. So if I select a specific system that I'm interested in finding out more information or finding a specific object, I can select it and then enter in the ID number or some sort of attribute that I'm aware of that would help point me to a specific spot. And then the scene viewer will actually dive and point you directly to where it is within the model. And that takes us into just the scene viewer itself. Now we've spent a lot of time over the past couple of years to make this experience improved and the way that you can interact with your information. Now all of this data and additional sources will all still feed directly into this process. So you do have the ability to capture the information from the buildings, from the utilities, and be able to experience this within a web scene. So you don't have to jump to multiple views of it or browse to different views of it within a desktop application. You can see all of this information within a single web browser. And so then that gives you the ability to experience your information, whether it's parts of the building, inside the building, and begin to use the tools that enable users to provide some sort of analysis on their portfolio of work. And again, that also incorporates, in addition to the MEP systems and the architectural and structural, you will see those same colors and textures come through into the web versions as well. Now that's not only the space that we're stopping at, right? We do want to help enable more users in this space. And what we see in that is, while we've incorporated Revit and Civil 3D data sets that can be brought in easily as a direct read, we recognize that there's a lot of more out there in this space with BIM file types. And in the real way to enable a lot of users, it's going to focus on this idea of allowing the ArcGIS Pro user to directly read IFC files. And so what that's going to do is, if there are other types that users are interested in having and bringing into their Pro sessions, they can bring in, let's say, DGN or let's say files from Vectorworks, bringing in a lot of other sources that we will help the user experience and build these scenes with IFC data. Is that nice transition and letting more information flow into our GIS models. And so what we're focusing on with this new integration that's being currently worked on is supporting IFC as GIS features on import, but making sure that it also works in the same way that we built it with Revit, so that way you can make your building layer from that content. And then one major consideration here is to keep in mind that this is only specific to the building IFC type. There are a lot of others out there too that are, let's say, the rail IFC, the highways IFC. And so those are still in the works of being vetted out and validated through their guideline groups and standards groups so within Building Smart. So until those are approved, this first version of what we're integrating within Pro will still just be focused on the building IFC. And we'll look into the other ones in the future, like the bridge IFC. So now that we've covered the information driving from BIM into ArcGIS Pro and then being shared as web services, next I wanted to showcase some of the examples of what you can do once you have web services, and even focus on what are some of the new things that we're building currently. First, starting off with the scene viewer itself, we've talked about earlier in this presentation how the information flows directly into web services and you don't lose it from the desktop version that you had originally. But once you're in the scene viewer, you do have daylighting capabilities that are standard out of the box features, or have this ability to actually explore the building directly by level. So selecting the Building Explorer with a building scene layer, I can select a specific level and then have it slice my campus across all of those buildings that were within that layer. Now, this layer specifically has over 90 Revit models within that single i3S layer. So by doing that, I have given the ability for the user now to, when it selects a floor level, it's going to slice that same floor level across all those buildings at the same time. So you can interact with the same location across multiple buildings and within your campus or environment that you're interested in viewing and interrogating. But that's not all, right? You can still filter your systems. You have the ability to turn off different subsystems or other features that maybe would help with understanding the area, but then also begin to use measurement tools in relation to that data. Or also check a specific square footage of a specific courtyard. But then in addition to just measuring and viewing shade analysis, it might also be just being able to section across large data sets that you just haven't been achievable without capabilities like this, and being able to extend this to users that can then view multiple parts of the campus. It's exposing users to items they may not have been able to experience in the past, but all from their single web browser. And just really trying to improve these experiences and how they're able to interact with the data that might help inform them about decision making. Now, while that's a good example just showing you what's out of the box, I think this is a great example from Esri Turkey and Recep Koksal, where he had built a Building Explorer app that takes a specific, let's say a condo or rental building, and be able to see it in context of where it is to, let's say, nearest locations or major points of contact, and be able to understand, like, if you're interested in purchasing or renting, like I said, understanding that context of the location, what you're actually possibly interested in contacting a survey about to see this place in person, but then also see the units themselves that are involved with each of these different floors, and be able to find out about the materials that were used or what's built, and really just help enable the user to experience a lot of this information before actually going in person, and to really help them with this understanding of what they may possibly be buying, or and see even in relation to nearby views of it. So I actually just like this ability to bring in multiple views of the data set that's still centered around this scene, right, of the building, but then be able to also bring in other elements that are really interesting and a lot of users ask about how to do this, right? It's a great example of this combination and federation of multiple data sections or points. Now, on this idea of web services, a new web-to-web integration that we worked on with Autodesk this past year was on building out this Esri partner card within Autodesk BIM 360 that allows our users who may be in both ArcGIS and Autodesk BIM 360 to add in their maps or scenes or apps directly within BIM 360. So using the Esri partner card, they can add their configurable URL that was used within their maps or scenes, add it into this space, and be able to share this GIS information with the users that might be focused on design, construction, and some operation uses, but directly within BIM 360. So they don't have to leave BIM 360 to also see their GIS and coordinate their information with it. And actually, that's a really good segue into what's the future and what we're focusing on next. That idea of cloud to cloud integration is actually at that interconnection between what we're focusing in the next year with Arcgis Geobim. And so what we're focused on here is that interconnection of ArcGIS with the Autodesk Construction Cloud, which is where BIM 360 resides. But this whole concept of cloud-to-cloud connectivity is to help enable users to experience both their BIM and GIS process data together and share that out in very distinct and useful GeoBIM applications that their stakeholders or their project delivery teams are really interested in understanding about, let's say, the business cases, the statusing, the performance of their projects, and being able to showcase that by connecting both their GIS and BIM directly within the same interface. And so one thing I'd just like to highlight about this is something we're still continuing to work on. And actually within our own development journey of this product, we've actually used a lot of our own ArcGIS platform components to help build it. So this product that we'll be releasing later this year is actually built on the Experience Builder interface and helping with that front-end view of setting up these GeoBIM applications. But then we're also using ArcGIS notebooks for some of the georeferencing processing of data from BIM 360 into ArcGIS, and also just helping make this a much more of a streamlined process for users within the AEC or operations space. This ability to have flexibility across different project types and different scales, but really help them build these end user interfaces that will really help them drive their business in the long run. And so we're really excited to share more about this later on this year, but just really wanted to highlight that as a great example of where we have actually taken in our own experience of what users want within this BIM and GIS space and are now continuing to build this out into a new product. And so you may be interested in some specific resources tied to BIM, CAD, and GIS. And so for that, we've listed out a couple of pages that might be interesting to you that kind of talk about digital twins, a little bit more information about GeoBIM if you're interested in hearing about that. But then a couple of other industry-specific pages too. So please provide your feedback for this session by filling out that survey below the video. And what we'll do next is actually take this into the question and answer session.
Hello, and thanks for coming to the session. My name is Steve Sanavasi. I'm a moderator here. I also have with me Chris Andrews and Anthony Renteria. And hopefully you enjoyed everything so far. And it looks like we have some pretty good participation for questions to go through. So I think we'll maybe just jump right into it. The first question we have here, is there any workflow for georeferencing Revit files in ArcGIS Pro? Anthony, you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. Really excited to hear what questions you have about what we presented. So first, starting off with the georeferencing of Revit files in Pro. I actually put in a reply to that question into the window. There is a great post from David Alvarez who kind of goes through the complexities of georeferencing Revit files, because as the user mentioned, if the user set up their coordinate system to be 0, 0, right, and it's some arbitrary point on the building or whatnot, that affects the way that you're going to georeference it within ArcGIS Pro. So I think what David does well in that blog post is kind of go through the subtleties of like what you do as the GIS user when you're receiving these files, and gives you some really good examples of, okay, how do you interact with it based off of that information. Like if you know that the units that are involved with it, do you know, did they use a project-based point or a survey point? Did they move the site point in any other way? Like, so there's a lot of those different really difficult things to work through, like how to best tell you how to do it. But I think his blog post really addresses that. But I think that's a really good way to think about Revit, though, too, is it's different from Civil 3D files, right, where you set a coordinate system, and it's going to be the way you interacted with it within Pros is going to be a little bit different. But again, very first step always is to think about to project your content, right? Because it needs to be projected within ArcGIS Pro for it to be, and first using some of the information that might be actually set up already within Revit too. I don't know, Chris, do you want to add anything else onto that one?
No, that sounds reasonable. At the end of the day, the best thing is if the BIM process itself actually mandates that files are geo-referenced up front, and so if they're not, then it becomes really difficult for use of the files later on in in workflows and context. But
yep.
All right, so from there, I think we'll jump into here, and there's a question here from Maria. Where do you see the ArcGIS engine fitting into the BIM-GIS interoperability currently and in the future? Chris, you want to take that one?
City Engine, yeah. So
Or City Engine.
Yeah, no problem. So City Engine is City Engine is used primarily in, say, kind of advanced urban design processes. It's not intended to be used to create BIM data or anything like that, but as we know, any kind of data can be used in BIM processes. So I fully expect that City Engine will be used by architects and urban designers to create proposed shapes and structures for buildings and other infrastructure, and then those artifacts can be used in the planning and evaluation and approval process in the BIM program. And so it's more in the early upfront side of BIM processes. But I don't think it's ever going to be like deeply involved in, say, BIM GIS interop or anything like that.
Okay, we have one here on direct support of IFC. I think that was in the video there, but Anthony, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so again, going back to the plan for direct support of IFC. Yes, that's exactly on our roadmap right now, what we're working on currently. We are really going through the testing of what we've built up to this point on that direct read capabilities. So just to reiterate again, we want to make sure that for users that want to bring in IFC content, you can use it just like we do with Revit right now at this point. So being able to use IFC within your BIM file to geodatabase workflows, create building layers, and use that the way that the way that we built Revit again. So it's being currently worked on. We're doing a lot of testing. It's always good to remember on that case that it is only going to be specific to the building IFC type. There's a lot of others out there that are really exciting, and I think we're waiting on the way the schema is going to break down by the different systems and how maybe a IFC road or highway or rail will be incorporated in the future. But for this very first version of how we implement IFC, again, it's going to be focused on the building IFC. And so when we talk about the timeline for that, just be looking for it for this year. We're planning to hopefully get that implemented by Pro for 2021.
All right. We have a question on here, an anonymous question, similar to the City Engine question, but where does Urban fit in? Chris, you want to take that one?
Sure, thanks, Steve. So ArcGIS Urban is a tailored experience for web-based experience for urban planners to be able to create plans, comprehensive plans, and then projects within those plans, and then share those for interactive evaluation with stakeholders and constituents. One of the reasons that Esri and other companies are investing in urban planning and design software is because it drives it's an upstream investment by customers into downstream processes. So we see urban as one of the places where you can bring together different types of data, including reality capture data and building scene layers and other GIS content to evaluate and explore proposed projects in the context of other existing projects and the rest of the built-in natural environment. Again, though, it's at the early phase where you're going to start kicking off and evaluating possible change that will happen in a large campus or a large or a city environment. But you're not going to be using urban to be, say, orchestrating the BIM process. That's going to be done in different tools. But urban and city engine both are part of the kind of the top of the pipeline of getting projects evaluated and proposed. And then once they get kicked off, then we see them being used in things such as the GeoBIM app that Anthony already presented about.
All right, that was a great answer. So we have two questions here on GeoBIM. So one of them is it going to work with ArcGIS Online and with Enterprise? And when will it be available? Anthony, you want to take that one?
Yep, I most certainly will. Thanks. So regarding ArcGIS Geobim, so the plan is for this year to have releases in both ArcGIS Online and Enterprise by the end of this year. So those will align with our ArcGIS Online and Enterprise releases. So looking forward to having those released towards the end of this year in the fall time frame. So yeah, it's actually very exciting. I think there's some other questions actually about GeoBIM as well. So we can get to those too. I also want to, I guess, make sure that we have time for other questions, but should we keep going with some more GeoBIM questions? Since I did see some in there.
Yeah, we do have another one. It says regarding GeoBIM apps. Actually, it just moved on me. Could all information be managed from ArcGIS Online file geodatabase? Or should there be a previous processing step?
Yeah, so this is the really, I think, really exciting thing about ArcGIS Geobim is it's about connecting existing services if you have them, right? That maybe are feature services within a GDB that have been hosted within Online or Enterprise that you then link and connect to your BIM 360 documents, either if that's a Revit file, a DWG file, even PDFs or images. So it's now opening up this capability of, as this user is starting to build, let's say, GeoBIM projects and applications, you will build these out based off of those links that you make between your data sets. So yes, if you will have this ability to use your existing services if you have them already within ArcGIS. But then another interesting aspect about GeoBIM is enabling the user that maybe doesn't know how to create a feature service that they can use to connect. Well, what we can do with GeoBIM is enable this geoprocessing tool that we're currently working on that will point this ArcGIS group, or let's say this ArcGIS area, to the folder structure within BIM 360, and then start to actually search through the folder structure that you've allowed it to based off of user permissions that you have within Autodesk, to then start to access the DWG file, access the Revit file, and extract out let's say, an area of interest or a project boundary of that file. And so then you actually have feature services that are simple 2D polygons that are automatically hosted in our services based off of your BIM 360 space that will then be automatically linked to that source. So then, in addition to the GIS user who can actually start to build these higher level visualizations, incorporating Revit and Civil 3D into multi-patch that can be shared out into these 3D scenes, you can have this other option of just, okay, all I need is a simple polygon that connects back and is georeferenced off of the location that was developed within BIM 360. So think about that. There's flexibility into the way that you can build a GeoBIM application in the future. The other thing I'll mention now, just because we're talking about GeoBIM too, is when GeoBIM does get released, we are going to be introducing 2 new item types. So there will be a GeoBIM project that will help the management of these links, the information associated to the data sets that you're linking across systems, and then really keeps track of that information, right, to allow security within these spaces. Because again, you're using your login for ArcGIS, but you're also using your login for BIM 360. So start thinking about, as the user is going to be building this, do they have the right permissions to access data in both systems? Other than that, once you have your GeoBIM project that's managing this information, this linking of data, then you will start to build GeoBIM applications based off of those links. So it's not just a one project to one app. situation, you may have one project that has 5, 10, maybe even more at GeoBIM applications. So the thinking behind that is you may have a GeoBIM application for an internal usage for, let's say, design coordination, or basically just internal usage of understanding and starting to plot out issues that you're through your coordination process. But then you may have a different GeoBIM app that you're going to use for sharing with your external, let's say, stakeholders or clients that you're building. These are either design or construction changes within organizations. So you're going to have more flexibility, and you have a GeoBIM app for internal, external, maybe both. So you do have this ability to use the same linking of data sets for multiple use cases. So yeah, so that's a quick thing that I probably didn't touch on in the presentation that might be useful for you all to think about moving forward.
Maybe just a quick comment before Steve goes
Sure.
on. There have been a couple questions about licensing and exact timing of GeoBIM, and we are not at liberty to talk about that yet. Those things are in process, and so when we can share that, we definitely will. But GeoBIM is planned for this year, and we are sorting out a licensing model that should be partner friendly.
Okay, I also see a couple of questions on here for pushing data the other way, pushing data back towards Revit. And if there is any plan for an ArcGIS plugin for Revit. Chris, you want to take that?
Yeah, so we've looked at building a plugin for Revit a couple of years ago. In fact, we even prototyped out an ArcGIS for Revit kind of extension, and it was more or less just a bandwidth issue for why we didn't continue with it. It's still something that is kind of on the to-do list, and we know it would be useful to some program participants. The reality is, though, that for most architects and folks who are in Revit, it wouldn't really be that useful. So we kind of need to wait for some of the awareness of geospatial to catch up to the so market need to catch up to kind of the opportunity to implement it. In terms of pushing edits back from GIS into Revit, we've avoided that so far. One of the biggest reasons is because we lose a lot of the parametric information in the assets themselves when they're brought from Revit through a conversion process into something like building scene layer. And so we certainly see that it would be useful to do attributes and metadata, some things like that. But it's right now we feel like we still are getting right we still have a lot of work to do to get right the flow of data from Revit and pretty soon hopefully IFC into ArcGIS, and at some point we will look at kind of rational workflows to push some edits back out, but it is a whole lot more complex than reading the data and viewing it in geospatial context to begin with. But then again, that's where things like GeoBIM come in, because if we can show you the building or the asset in context and have you actually pop open a window in BIM 360 that allows you to update attributes and also kind of honor the versioning required over in the BIM content management system, then that's a whole different ball game in terms of allowing you to put the GIS context and BIM in the hands of somebody who can kind of do everything at once in the right system. So that's I'd be thinking, I don't know, anything more to add on that, Anthony or Steve?
I think those are all valid
Yeah.
points. Yep.
Okay.
There.
We have a few questions, similar type questions on sort of the categories and families coming from Revit into the geodatabase feature data sets. So Anthony, if you want to talk a little bit on the categories and families that are extracted there, and maybe touch on areas and rooms.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think what I'd like to hear is if you are experiencing, let's say, some categories that are missing or attributes that you expect to come through there or not, I would love to hear which ones. I think we've done a lot, like I've said, we've done a lot of work on Revit direct read. So that way we've incorporated a lot of, I would say, most of what users are already building within their Revit data model. And so it'd be interesting if it's a custom attribute that's not coming through. But I think for the most part, up to now, a lot of our direct read capabilities have incorporated most, if not all, of the family types within Revit. I think one of the most recent ones that still needed to be implemented was probably some more of like the cable tray, low, data, let's say the low voltage data types. And so what I'd like to hear, I guess, on that one is which parts are still not, coming through that you expect. For rooms, we definitely bring those in. Areas, no. And I think that's the other, probably the challenge that maybe the user is asking about. Areas are a little bit of a challenge, I think, at this point, because while rooms are actually 3D volume spaces, right, that have a lot of rich information. Areas are a little bit more of a, I'd say, almost a 2.5D approach to managing space, like managing the rooms within these spaces or area maps. And so I think we've heard some conversations and customer interaction on those specific needs there. I think what we'd love to see is a little bit more examples of what you're trying to access out of the space or the area that might be helpful to you too, to see if there's other improvements that we could think we can discuss and incorporate for the future. So I think if you can, again, I think another thing that'd be great is we do have a lot of experts in the space in the Ask Our Experts interface within the Dev Summit applications. And so please, if we can maybe do some more direct interaction there to have those conversations and see some examples, we can even set up some other meetings with you afterwards as well. The other thing I wanted to touch on before, because I think it was at the top, but it's been, I don't think we've kind of come back to it, is Civil 3D. I think, so Nick had a question, and I think I've already replied to it, and it addresses part of the question there about incorporating complex Civil 3D object types, like how can ArcGIS Pro do it? What I was going to say, so I've already replied and gave you, Nick, an example of how you can incorporate some of the Civil 3D surface information and start to build out your surfaces within Pro. That addresses that aspect. So that would be the current workflow you can do right now. The other side of it too is tied to assemblies and corridors. We do not support those right now on direct read. And so that aspect is something I think I'd love to hear more from you on, is like, what would you like to incorporate from your corridors? I think one way I've seen it done up to this point is, yes, the Civil 3D user can export out, let's say, a solids DWG file representation of their corridors and bring that into Pro. But if there was another way that would be easier for you using, let's say, those assemblies and corridors, I'd love to hear more about it. So if you can, we'd love to have some more conversations about that.
Ooh, excuse me. So I see on here, there's a question about the safe harbor statement that Chris gave in the beginning regarding to the possibility of the changing of functionality as things go on. And the question is there any risk that this development could be aborted? I would say that there's no risk that it's going to be aborted. I think the statement goes to cover that this is sort of the direction that we're going in, and the functionality and specifics within the integrations may change, but I don't believe that there's any risk in aborting the whole interaction there.
Yeah. I think in general we've spent, so we started the Autodesk Esri effort actually just about 5 years ago, May. So we're almost up on the 5 years, and that was, that's there's been a tremendous amount of investment since then, including the two folks who are on the phone or on the line here with me. They weren't in in Esri back then, and now they're AEC centric product managers. We've started a whole sales channel. Many of our distributors have started sales channels. So we have product efforts, we have business development efforts, and we have partnerships that are all around this growing interest in BIM and GIS. So yeah, Steve's right. We're not going to abort any focus in BIM and GIS, but could there be some critical issue that comes up that says, hey, GeoBIM doesn't release till 2022? Yes, absolutely. Could there be a critical issue that comes up that says IFC interop doesn't, import directory doesn't happen till 2022 or later? Yes, that could also come up. Safe harbor statements are a legal way for us to be able to say, here's what we're working on, take a look at it, but don't make business decisions based upon it. And if you do, you can't blame us. And there are all kinds of other other things like revenue recognition and other things that come into play there that are important for corporations to just be aware of. So.
All right, Anthony, I have a softball question for you. Is there a beta program for GeoBIM?
So we actually do not have a beta program at this time. And one thing I want to stress on GeoBIM is we have this early adopter community that we've started to just discuss GeoBIM around and discuss, basically talk about its use cases, how it's, being brought together, how we're building it. We don't even have an alpha for GeoBIM at this point. And part of that too is we need to first get embedded within our services. So when we, let's say, get further down the line of development this year, we would love to be able to open up, let's say, a beta within services. So it's a lot easier for customers to actually begin to start testing and using some of their data sets and start to see how this linking of information is going to be useful. We'd love to continue moving towards that and see if we can open that up for customers. But at this time, we don't have it scheduled at this point as a point in time when there might be, let's say, a public beta or even like a private beta that's through our existing services at this point. So I think one thing I'd love to hear, though, is if you see interest in using a GeoBIM for your projects, I'd love to hear more about why. Like, how do you see yourselves using it? And is there certain types of information, the way it's structured within both BIM and GIS, that you think is actually going to be a way for it to quickly start to link up and use services in a way that's going to be beneficial to your users too?
All righty. I see one more Civil 3D question on here, which we may have touched a little bit on it, but it has to do with when pipe networks come over from Civil 3D, do the pipes and structures maintain the attributes, pipe size, type, flow? Anthony?
Ooh, that's a good question. So when we built the integration to be a direct read of pipe networks, yes, we are building it so that way the attribution comes through. That's the purpose of the direct read integration. Now, I think the challenge here, though, is there's some, I think, situations of how is it represented within 3D. So I think we have built in some arcade language to help with that. I think there's still some more work, I think, in the workflow itself. I actually forgot to mention name drop Richard Horrocks, who built that, who basically wrote that blog post on how to create a surface from Civil 3D. Also has another blog post on how do you create basically your feature services from the Civil 3D content. So that might be another good resource. And I know Richard has been in the Ask Our Experts booth, the virtual booth this week. So he's also there, I think, to really find out a little bit more about that workflow question that you have. I would love to hear more, though. I think that's one that we could pinpoint exactly what you're trying to do with the pipe network and see if parts of it aren't coming through. I think we want to see why that is, what part is not making its way through that direct read interoperability, and see what else we could possibly be incorporating to for you and your workflows.
All right, Chris, I see a question on here that applies to ArcGIS Online and maybe the future of adding slice, daylight, and measure tools like there are in this 3D scene layer.
Yeah. So I think what the question means is in the scene viewer, not the scene layers. The scene layers don't have tools associated with them per se, but
right.
So many of the tools, such as the daylight widget, are already available as widgets that you can actually plug and play into a custom ArcGIS API for JavaScript app. I built such an app for a conference not too long ago, and I think I even included the daylight widget. I'll see if I can look up the video that I recorded for it. But so the best thing to do is just to search the ArcGIS, use Google and search ArcGIS API for JavaScript, and then the name of the widget that you're referring to. Most of them are provided as samples, including the profile tool, the daylight tool, and several others. I'm not sure that everyone is, though, so if there's something missing, then just let us know.
All righty. Let's see here. Point clouds in Civil 3D. Will they import into ArcGIS Pro?
No, that's a no. It doesn't do that. So when we're incorporating the data types from Civil 3D, it's based off of the Civil 3D entity types. So what is that? Like pipe, again, going back to the pipe networks, alignments, surfaces, information that builds the surfaces. So it's using those basic Civil 3D typical item types, AC entity types. So point clouds, no, would not come through with it.
Yeah, that said, most of the data that is able to be used in Civil 3D, except for the recap point format, LAS, LAZ, those typical files can be directly brought into ArcGIS, but we don't currently have an importer for that RCP format.
Alrighty. I see in the waiting room here, there's a couple of questions on the ArcGIS for AutoCAD plugin. Let me move those over here quickly. And it looks like the questions are regarding the plugin for AutoCAD to import GIS data. Is the data being viewed in AutoCAD? And then can it be saved to a DWG file? And the other question similarly is it read-only or can it actually be converted to AutoCAD elements ready for editing in AutoCAD and then saved to the DWG? So I think that the answer is yes, when you have the ability to connect to the actual GIS data and be able to work with that data directly inside of the AutoCAD drawing and save it back, or bring the data down and save it to a drawing. Chris or Anthony, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you can snapshot out bits of it and save it, and then but there's also ways to keep live links to it too. So it's built for both types of workflows. And the symbology limitations, I don't think there are any. It's just whatever you can do in AutoCAD at that point.
Yeah, I think the other thing I saw was the other question about, I think from Divya, about, I think it's, by the way, Divya, I think we were just trying to verify if you were talking about the Esri Turkey demonstration that we had in the presentation. I think that whole app that he built, Recip built, if you want us to also, he's pretty really available. Like if you search for his name on LinkedIn, he's easy to access to talk about how he set this up. But yeah, he'd be a great source for that. I think about how did he do it. But I guess that was the biggest thing. Like, how did he incorporate the floor plans? I think he's using Experience Builder. There's a couple of things that I think you talking to him directly would also be a great resource for you too. So if you wanted to, if you need to, just message me through the Ask Our Experts direct chat or something, and I can give you his email address that I have. So if you wanted to answer that, in addition to all the other questions that we were, I saw that on there. I want to make sure that you got answered on that. I think because that's what you're asking there.
Okay, looks like there's a question on the interoperability extension, and how does this differ from it? So for transforming DWG and shape files to bring the BIM files in.
Yeah. I tell you what, I'll take that one quickly because I think we're running out of time here. So
yeah,
in most workflows, using the data interop extension, users will bring data through conversion directly into feature layers. And the feature layers will be 3D objects, point, line, polygon, that kind of thing. The building scene layer is a different beast that is specially handled through ArcGIS Pro and other parts of ArcGIS. The building scene layer is actually created from a composite of kind of semantically organized multi-patch feature layers. It would be possible, for example, to use ArcGIS Pro to read a Revit file, create a GDB based upon that Revit file, and then to separately use FME or data interop to then import data into that geodatabase schema that was originally created from that Revit file. But you couldn't, or it would be very difficult to go just through FME into that geodatabase. It's possible, but it would be easier to start with the Revit file to kind of shape it. So there are some subtle differences right now. FME data interop can't directly create that schema that you'd want to then go into a building scene layer. Um, so there are some subtle differences there, and that actually I wanted to address another question a little further up, which was also can the BIM import tools extract asset data from BIM models ready for building asset inventories? Well, in some ways it depends. In fact, we are trying very hard, and Anthony mentioned this earlier. We're trying very hard to read everything possible in the Revit file and in the hopefully near future the IFC file. We've even had some customers, including one in GSA, go through and actually give us back a report of everything that was pulled out of a Revit file into a geodatabase, and then to map it back to see what was missing. And we actually had a really, really high hit rate. There was one group back then of electrical assets that were not brought over, but I think we've even added those. So on one side, I'd say if you see something missing that you know is in the Revit file, let us know. And that's just a repeat of what Anthony said. The other side of it is, though, and this addresses a few of the questions that have come up, is that it's a garbage in, garbage out problem. So if the BIM program or the owner operator specs aren't set up to demand that the right information are in the BIM file to then make it into GIS, then you know, even if we know we pull out all the metadata and the correct user-defined fields and all that kind of stuff, if they don't exist, then we can't do anything about that. So it's more than just a tech problem; it's also a process problem. So on our side, if you see anything missing that you can see in Revit or in an IFC viewer in the future that's there and it's missing in GIS, let us know. But on the other hand, if it's not there, we can't invent it in most cases.
All right, so we're about out of time here. I would like to thank everyone for attending. Thank you for participating in the polls and for the bunch of great questions. If there are any additional questions, please go to the Ask Our Experts. You can go into the Smart Cities and Digital Twins room, and we can get more questions answered there. Thank you for participating.
Thank you, Stephen, Anthony.